Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Theater Cliffhangers, or What Comes Next, with your host, Gordy McCall. That's me, yours truly. Okay, so this episode, called Chickens Everywhere, I'm going to introduce a new feature. It's called Shakespeare's Green Room. Now, for those of you who don't know, Shakespeare had his performances in the Globe Theatre and the Rose Theatre, basically outdoor theaters, but they were housed within wooden structures. But there were times when traveling troops would present shows on the back of, basically think of hay wagons that they would tow through town. And they'd do it in tents. And when they did that, they had to have a place where they could separate the actors from the public when they were getting ready so they weren't seen. And they built this structure out of bent green boughs of trees. I'm going to insert a photo of something just like that. And therefore, it became called the Green Room. The Green Room was actually attributed to the green boughs that you see in the picture. It wasn't painted green or anything like it. But it is an homage to that structure, for those who know. And for those who don't know, they're still paying homage because it's green. Okay, so there's my Shakespeare Green Room tidbit for you this week. Let's go back to the summer of 1987. And at the Shakespeare on the Saskatchewan Festival, we were presenting a production of Macbeth. Now, that's commonly called the Scottish play, or Big Mac, or Mackers. And there's a reason for that. The tradition is you do not say the actual title in the theater, especially if you're in production with the play. So in rehearsal, we would never say the actual name. However, we would have to call the character by their name, and that was okay because it was within the structure of the play. Lots of superstitions around Shakespeare, and I'm going to share more of them with you along the way. Anyway, so we're presenting the Scottish play in our tent, not right next to, but close to the Besborough Theatre, or Besborough Hotel, which is now called, I think, the Delta in downtown Saskatoon, on the beautiful grassy banks of the Mawasson Valley Authority. The grassy banks run along the river for about 2 miles. They're manicured. It's just gorgeous. And so that's where we were. I always want to view Shakespeare's work through a contemporary lens, or a period in history that reveals something that most of us might not have connected. And the way we do that is we keep the words as Shakespeare wrote them. We don't change them. But then we view it through another lens. In this case, because of the conflict in the play, I chose to set it in Guatemala, contemporary Guatemala, because there was some rebellion or revolution going on in Guatemala at the time. Therefore, we were able to connect part of the play to the history of Guatemala and the lineage, the heritage, particularly of the Mayan indigenous people, as for years they were called the Mayan Indians. Now, the reason I made that connection is because it was a perfect fit to make the Mayans the witches in the play. There's witches and black magic in the Scottish play. Violence and the conflict and trying to usurp the throne of the people in power, overthrow, all of that was there. So we dressed up in camouflage uniforms. We carried machetes instead of swords as weapons. And we had built for us a beautiful equivalent of a Mayan altar that ran down the middle of the tent. So the audience was seated on 3 sides. On the far end, let's say, if you're seated on the end opposite of the closed off end, you would see this Mayan altar. It was raised about, I'm going to say, a foot off the floor, sculpted out of cement, just beautiful. And then I'll call it a little shelter built at the end of it. So the witches, if you will, lived in there throughout the whole play. The reason I did that was it's my belief that in that world of the play, the witches were always watching. You couldn't see them a lot of the time, but they were always present. So I made them literally present, and they lived in there. At times they would come out, but by living in there, what they're doing is observing the action and manipulating it through their spells, etc. And over top of them, the actors could walk on this structure and never even see them. So it worked beautifully. So the witches were dressed up in traditional Mayan costume, and they had machetes themselves, but they also had cigars. Tobacco is a big crop in Guatemala, and they had something else. They had chickens. Now, I don't think today I might even be able to do this. I might be stopped by someone from doing this. But it was just simply we had chickens in the play. We had actors, we had chickens. And the chickens hung out in that little enclosure, and they were very well behaved. I think we had 3 chickens, and the witches looked after them, and then we housed them when they weren't involved in the play in a very nice area, and fed them well. They were well taken care of. And I think we even got some eggs from them. Anyway, so there we were. We had captured the essence of what Guatemala might represent at that time in the world. And so everything just looked great, perfect. Until one day in rehearsal, we're in the tent, and the chickens decided, I don't know, maybe they were bored. They decided to, or maybe they wanted to go for a beer over at the Besborough Hotel. Not quite sure, but they escaped. That's it. Cliffhanger. Cliffhanger, remember, is a turning point, an unexpected turning point in a story, and it makes us want to go, hey, what comes next? Well, I'm going to tell you what comes next, but first of all, I want to give you the opportunity to see if you can figure it out, okay? And while you're doing that, we're going to go to this feature I call Shakespeare's Green Room. You now know what the Green Room is, so let's go there. Today in Shakespeare's Green Room, we're going to learn that he is omnipresent, even to this day, hundreds of years after his death. And where is he omnipresent? In our language, in our English language. And why is that? It's because we use words that Shakespeare invented in our everyday conversation. For us as actors and directors and scholars of the work of William Shakespeare, the first folio is our Bible. It is going back to the source. It's almost like we had a first compiled copy of the Bible, and no disrespect to the Bible. It's just that for us who work with the works of William Shakespeare in our professional lives and our non-professional lives, I must say, the first folio is fantastic. And it is like the Bible to us, as I said. Okay, so in here, in his research, his amazing research, this scholar, Doug Moston, discovered these things. Shakespeare invented, as I mentioned, 1,700 words. And take note of this. The King James Bible makes use of 8,000 words. An educated person in our lifetime uses about 17,000 words in their vocabulary. The number in Shakespeare's vocabulary, some 34,000. The Bible, 8,000. Educated person, 17,000. And Shakespeare, 34,000. Now you know why we revere this man. Okay, he did it this way. He employed nouns as verbs, invented new words, not just as a means of being clever, but for precision. He actually invented over 1,700 words, and here's some of them: accommodation, premeditation, assassination, submerged, exposure, frugal, generous, luxury, impartial, timely, castigate, control, majestic, pious, sanctimonious, obscene. Just some of the words. So I want you to know that because you use a lot of these words in your everyday life. And therefore, amazingly, Shakespeare has traveled down the centuries and is still within us. And a lot of people still think, oh, Shakespeare, he's inaccessible. It's too difficult. I don't understand the words. Well, yes, you do. A lot of them you say in your everyday life. Now, you might ask yourself, here's the final point. How did the audience know what that word was when it was first said? That would be a good question. And I think the answer is this. The actors knew the meaning. Shakespeare conveyed the meaning to them. Remember, he was there. He was a member of the acting troupe as well as a director. And of course, the playwright. And so they would assist the audience in understanding the first time the word was said through their action. There's two kinds of action. There's physical action and there's psychological action. Your intent, how you want to get something through the use of that word. And the audience became educated in the watching of the play. Isn't that fantastic? Okay, so that's our trip to Shakespeare's Green Room for this episode. And now back to the cliffhanger. We're back. What happened? The chickens got loose. Chickens everywhere. Well, the intrepid cast, and I remember that day we were doing a rehearsal. It was in the afternoon. We didn't have that many people in that rehearsal, but we definitely had the witches. And this is what I recall. The Bessborough Hotel had behind it a beautiful, let's call it a patio. And there were lawn chairs there for the guests. And they could go out and have a drink or suntan because it was always pretty hot in Saskatoon in the summer. And so they were lounging, enjoying themselves. And suddenly, 3 chickens came hurtling through the hedge that surrounded that whole area. And behind them came 3 strange-looking creatures carrying machetes, cigar in one hand, machete in the other, with these headdresses on, hopping the hedge and running after the chickens. And just imagine if you were one of the guests. And of course, the actors playing the witches were making vocalizations like, come here, you know what I mean? Not quite Shakespearean, but you get the point. Well, it caused an uproar. People were jumping up out of their seats. The chickens were running around, and you know how chickens are. They go in different directions. So I can't remember if people got up to help, but finally the chickens were corralled. And I think one of them got out into the park, actually. They were brought back, and they were none the worse for wear. They had a great time. And then we restarted the rehearsal. So that's what came next. The chickens escaped and the chase began. Chickens everywhere. Okay. So, thanks for joining us again, ladies and gentlemen. If you could, hit the subscribe button below, just below the video. That would be greatly appreciated. The more subscribers, the more of this I can present to you. And I love to do it. So leave comments if you'd like. And also hit the like button. Subscribe and like. Okay, and I just want to leave our broadcast here with this thought as usual. Remember, we are our stories. Okay, take care. See you next time on Theater Cliffhangers, or What Comes Next.